from Seattle, Washington. I mean, I can't believe I'm saying. I guess you're having an influence on me already, man, and I'm thinking about DC already. But good morning from Seattle, Washington. My name is Ibrahim Asonko. Once again, I am the host of the Dialectic Space Podcast, and with me today is my brother, another Gambian based in DC, United States.
Well,
Uh,
Farang is another Washington.
right?
Yes.
So we are both
Hmm.
Washingtonians, although from different
Exactly.
parts of the country. So I'm excited to introduce all of you to Amat Jeng. Amat is a
Jake,
Gambian. Amat.
if you if you give me young, I'm gonna end the
Okay,
conversation.
let me tell you a story though. Let me tell you a story because I have a high school friend from Nusrat High School called Amat Jeng,
I
and we
think I know
started.
him. Amat Jeng. I've been in Janalaya. I think I've been a Gambian woman Galfa, I think, right?
I don't know if I tell him, but this guy, we went to Nusrat High School together. He's young.
Yeah, yeah, Amat Jeng. Amat Jeng. I've been America. Like, he moved here for a few years ago.
No, it's a different Amat Jeng. This one
It's different.
is currently based in Gambia, yes, and we went to
Oh,
Nusrat
okay.
together. What
Okay. Okay.
human beings? So we're really close. So the first time we talked, and
Okay.
since then my mind is constantly remembering him.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So
All right.
indulge me when I mistakenly call you by his name. But yes,
Yes.
this
Yes.
gentleman
It's
right here, his name is Amat Jeng. He's a Gambian public intellectual based in Washington D.C. Also an author. His popular book Between Two Horizons, right here with me, is currently available on Amazon and also on eBay. For those Gambians who are interested to learn about his fictional, a combination of fiction and also lived experiences from Sweden, Gambia to the United States, where he talked about a lot of issues that most of us can relate with, especially for most Gambians who, not only Gambians, but most Africans who live in the diaspora. Ahmad has a specific interest in migration, foreign policy, but also democratization in Africa, among other issues. And today, I'm really lucky and also very thankful to have him on this platform to talk to us about his research interests, to talk to us about critical areas of his public work, but also to have a specific conversation on the political realities of our country, the Gambia, and the larger African continent. Ahmad, welcome to the Dialectic Space Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Ibrahim. I'm good. I'm good. I have my cup of coffee, which is a good start. But Marina Morado, everybody. I hope everybody is good. It's 6 o'clock right now. 6 o'clock a.m. Ngamira I'll talk the three mafa, right?
I'm telling you, man, it's three
Yes,
it's
yes,
3 a.m.
yes.
over here.
So it's quite early in the US right now. I don't know in other parts of the US, but in most parts, it's quite early. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure. I am honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. Just to add on to that, Ahmad is right. It's 3 a.m. right now in Seattle, and it's about 6 a.m. in Washington, D.C. But, things that we have to do, like I always say, are things that we need to do. There is absolutely no excuse whatsoever. And we agreed on this time, and we're here. And hopefully, we'll bring you really interesting and wonderful conversation on a variety of issues that I think are important for one or two people to learn a thing or two from. So we're going to begin from the top. Obviously, there's a Ibrahim, you don't sleep. Somebody wrote in the comment section that I don't sleep. That's funny. I do sleep. It's just planning. I plan myself. I try to plan myself a lot with all the things that I do to ensure that the commitments that I put myself to, I'm able to meet them. So sleep doesn't always have to be at night. You just have to plan
Mm,
yourself accordingly. But Ahmad, once again,
yes.
thank you so much for being here. So we're going to really get to it. And very briefly, if you would paint a picture of your upbringing to us.
Yes.
Also, obviously, there is a lot about you that I believe most people don't know, likely due to your humility. But I
Thank
think
you.
I
Thank you.
can confidently say to all of our audience that you are one of the most published Gambian young intellectuals out there. It's incredible the amount
Thank
of
you.
academic materials that are out there for people who are interested to learn about your work, for people who are
Thank you.
interested to know about your work, or for Gambians who are interested in those areas of academic research. There is tons of materials that he has written about, that he has talked about online. And so I indulge all of our audience to check it out, please. So paint a picture of your childhood to us. Where in the Gambia are you from? What was your
Yes.
upbringing like?
Mm.
And what values or principles shape your upbringing? And were
Yes.
there also aspirational or inspirational figures in your life that
Mm.
played key roles to in your upbringing?
Thank you, Ibrahim. This is indeed wonderful, but also so many questions loaded in one, which is I tend to sometimes forget certain questions. So I have a goldfish memory. My memory is not really good. Um, if I had really good memory, I would do mathematics. I respect mathematicians and physicians. I am not woman kind of idiot. Um, so I grew up in a very communal setting in Gambia, where life was structured less by individual ambition, but more by shared responsibility. I'm from was born in Sarajide, in Central River region. It's a 5 minute drive or 10 minute drive from Bansan. So I did a lot of my childhood in Bansan, but I went to Santanto Primary School. Growing up, you we did talk about this. Every Gambian, you aspire to become a footballer. So playing football, going to villages to play football, inter-villages competition. We used to go up to Casamas to play football. Deeper inside Casamas to play football. Some teams would pick me up, me and my brother and some friends. During the Nawetan period, we would play football. This is a side a lot of people don't know. When they see me, they're like, "You play football?" Nah, I don't think so. So yeah, I went to Bansan Junior Secondary School, and I think my formative. I think I got my a lot of my inspiration there. I used to have a French teacher, Tomo, Namira Tomo Muse Talti. Yeah, I think he was Senegalese. Muse Tal, he saw a potential in me in terms of language and French. He was very helpful. So that was how I came to learn French and etc etc. But he would share some books with me and all of that, and I think the inspiration mostly because you didn't like grow up around intellectuals or people who went to school. Probably you are the first person in your community to go to college or even to go to high school or even enroll in primary school. You realize that a lot of the inspiration you probably would get later on as something you get from books, right? So there was this particular book called it's The African Child. A lot of people growing up that time, I think even in the early 80s and 90s, must have come across this book called African Child by Camara Lai. In French, it's called L'Enfant Noir. Very important. So I read about it. I read about the author. He was a Guinean. Went to France. So imagine he was just like you and I. A typical immigrant who wanted to make it in France. So he would go to work or school or whatever, and he would write the book in the evening when he come home. So his life basically oscillated between school, work, and writing. So I found that inspiring, and this is how life started for me. Went to do my senior secondary school in the Combos. Since I didn't know anybody, yeah, I mean, we didn't have any family member in the Combos. I got to stay with family friends, and more importantly, I had to be the one to go around schools to look for a place for me, and that was really hard if you don't know anybody and nobody is there to help you. So I went to this school that said, they look at my result, they say, "Oh, we can give you a scholarship." And you can. I'm like, what? I went to Gambia, I didn't look at me. I went to Nusrat, they're like, no, they didn't give me access to even talk to anybody. A typical village boy, somehow provincial boy, and then you are there with your, uh, you know, I don't know, but anyway, it didn't go through. So I went to Charles Fowler Senior Secondary School, Wobe Kanifimle,
Yeah.
But during those days, we also had NAPSA, which was very active in schools, which Amadou Jite and few others were Momadou Jallo, Justina Hadin. So Untolka Benu Nusrat, with all those people, and we debate them, and it was very inspiring, Sitinjai at that time was also, coordinating NAPSA at that time, during this time. So all those people who came before you or after you, before you, there were people that I had been like, Robin Salter with at Centrisas in Carnifim, where we would debate until late in the night, about NAPSA, about a lot of other things. This is Jammeh's era. So yeah, I grew up around that, and of course, I think the further inspiration came, growing up in Tipakunda, slash Latrikunda German, around Sarahule communities. If I tell you I speak Sarahule, you wouldn't believe that.
Wow.
So yeah, and growing up around that, and also around the Moor, the Nars family in Latrikunda Germany, which is also a language I have learned to speak. So this elderly Sarahule man, one of them I remember Bala, I think Musa, I used to call him Hydra. He passed away. He would call me. He would say, "Hey, Lee, tahuyere nandigamu. Like, sit down here. Let's have a conversation." This he was a scholar, a marabu in a sense. In the African epistemic, I would say he was a great scholar, right? So I would sit with him. We would talk. And also we had people like Paisa Kamara in Tipakunda,
Yeah.
who would call me and say, "Hey, nah, sit down, sit down at the Amudomani," something like that. All these elderly people inspiring you, giving you, wisdom in one way or the other. That was really inspiring. So yes, I'm sorry. This was supposed to be brief. It feels like I've gone beyond what was expected.
No,
Thank
no,
you.
no. You haven't. I think that's very fitting, Ahmad. But you've mentioned something very briefly, and that is
Yeah.
the fact that there is an aspect of you, like most young Gambians too. Football. In America,
Yes,
we call it
yes,
soccer, and anytime I call it soccer, people are quick on
yeah,
my comment section to remind me. In fact, that is part of now your
yes,
self-absorbed American exceptionalism that has taken over.
yes, yes,
but
yes, yes,
but to make the
yes,
point that I think and we talked about this on the phone too. The fact that some of us would perhaps be soccer players if we're born in other places other than
yes,
some of the
yes,
environments that we're born in. And you did.
absolutely,
There's an aspect of to your life that we'll get to eventually. You also played soccer all the way to second division in Sweden. I think that blew
absolutely.
my head off.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of people still now don't know that. But if you just Google, you type my name and my last name and then Sweden or something, you probably see the teams I played, the goals I scored, and all of that. And this is something a lot of people, like I said, wouldn't imagine. Yeah, but yes, that is another part of my Swedish story.
So were you a striker, a midfielder?
Yes,
What?
yes. I actually I was a striker. I play midfield. I play different positions, but in Sweden mostly I play the striking forward and the winger, right winger. My left is terrible, right? I'm like they said, I'm dead right. So my left is really bad. My only left side of my life is when it comes to politics. So I'm a little bit left on that, if not extremely left. I've been accused of being a Marxist or whatever. So yes, yes, I play that part. I play the midfield. When you growing up as a child too, you would try different things. I remember one day we went to the field. I used to be very good at goalkeeping, right? And one day we went to the field. My brother, Bubakar Jeng, he said, "Okay, from now on, we want you to just maintain the goal and be a goalkeeper." I'm like, "Okay." And that was the only day I played goalkeeper seriously. The next day I went back. I'm like, I want to score. You want to be there. You want to be the one who scored, and then the crowd is cheering at you. You have maybe your girlfriend or somebody whom you had a crush on, and they're behind, watching you. You want them to be, celebrating, right? So scoring goal. Scoring goals was seen as an avenue to being appreciated, being accepted into whatever life you wanted to be accepted in. So yes.
Well, we certainly share that in common because I'm also, I still play, but I used to enjoy playing soccer, and I always say that if not for the other commitments of life, I
Yeah.
probably would still be playing soccer somewhere because of,
Yes, absolutely.
it just the
Absolutely.
limitless joy that it gives you just
Hmm.
kicking that thing, that
Absolutely.
item is just incredible.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
moving on. Ahmad, so growing up in the Gambia, talk to us about what was perhaps the social, political, and economic situation of the country at the time, and to the extent that as a young child, and I take a reference for myself, I come from a very humble beginning, and very
Hmm.
early on, I understood
Absolutely.
what
Hmm.
poverty really meant and what it meant to go to school without uh,
Absolutely.
proper books, putting my books in a plastic bag without proper
Absolutely.
lotion, with in an empty stomach. I understood that
Oh
very
yes. Oh
early on.
yes. Oh yes.
And so,
Oh
but I
yes.
also understood the role of my community in shaping me into
Hmm.
becoming who I am, and that I was not the sole responsibility of my parents. A lot of
Hmm.
people chipped in to support me through.
Absolutely.
So, how was the situation like for you growing up,
Yes.
and
Yes.
what,
Absolutely.
both at a personal and personal level, at a community level, but also in terms of at a national level, what was happening, i-
Hmm. Hmm.
as you can,
Hmm.
for to the extent that you can remember as a young person in the
Hmm.
Gambia?
Yeah, it's important because I grew up during the Jawara era. Not so much into the Jawara era. I'm not so much old as probably a lot of people might think. I was born 87, which is I'm heading to my 39. The Jawara era was marked by stability rather than transformation, and politics that time felt a little bit distant. But we also have to know that this was the time of what we call SAP. SAP is the Structural Adjustment Program that the World Bank gave to African countries to force them to devalue their currency, but also to slice the workforce, to sell certain companies and privatize and all of that. And that caused a lot of hardship. A lot of people lost their jobs, crop failure in many parts of the continent. It became chaotic. If you look at it, this was in the 80s. And of course, in 82, before I was born, the cost of the structural adjustment, that is one of the many reasons that led to the Casamas conflict, to the conflict to conflicts in many parts of the continent. Now, um, politics, like I said, felt distance, but it was also seen as something that was managed by elders and elites during that time. But that distance was itself educational for me. It taught me that politics is often invisible until it is felt. So and that ordinary people live with political consequences long before they talk about political ideas. Until like Gruta of Dame Central River region, we didn't have any school around, right? The first school was built by Jammeh, I think around 1994, 95. And we were actually the first students to be enrolled in Santanto Primary School, which is actually 10 minutes away from Mankamankunda, President Barrow's hometown. So we kind of like pretty close from there. But again, when Jame built that school, that gave him a lot of support from the community. Jame has built a school for our kids. Now everybody can learn, because education itself felt very distant during that time. And I remember walking to school. We used to walk like almost, let me put this in kilometers, not in miles, okay, like 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers to school. It's quite far. And to keep me company, I had a walkie-talkie, which my mother never saw, but I had it in my bag, and I had a cassette of Lucky Dube. So I would play Lucky Dube. I mastered most of Lucky Dube's lyrics. I can sing them, all of them, basically. So I would play that. One day when I came home, my uniform was in my bag, and my sister happened to be home. She came from her husband in Casamance. She came to visit, and she opened my bag. She wanted to do laundry, and she saw that walkie-talkie, and she was like, "Oh my God!" She was flabbergasted. Right? She called my mom and said, "Oh, this kid is not gonna learn. You see what he is listening to? I don't know what sort of music it is, but this is bad." Because my sister thought it was Bob Marley, which
Mhm.
didn't have a good name during that time. My mother, she beat me. Okay, she took the walkie-talkie and put it in the fire. Okay, and she beat the hell out of me that day. So that was the last day I saw that walkie-talkie. Then she's not educated, right? But I was like, what did this woman see in education that she would basically week in, week out, walk 6 kilometers to the school to check on me, to ask the school if I am behaving in class. Not that I was a stubborn person,
Mhm.
but just that was inspiring for me. And of course, like I said, the Jawara was a post-colonial stabilizer, if you want. So his leadership was more on survival, unity and institutional continuity at the time, when many African states were collapsing into violence, right? So when Jammeh came to power in '94 and in '96, I remember, I think one of my family members was sick. We were at the Bansan Hospital, yeah, so outside, where you have a lot of people sitting outside waiting for their loved ones, or waiting for the doctor, or what have you. So we were sitting there, I think during this time, I think '96 or something. This was Jammeh's first nationwide tour. With the military, he still had the beret and all of that. So he traveled from the convoy. He passed Bansan, and I saw the fanfare. I was somehow inspired. In a sense, I wish I had, I wish I was one of those people in one of those cars, right? But that didn't, it's just a childhood fantasy during that time. But politics felt very distant growing up, and I have seen poverty. Came from a very humble beginning. Even though my father had a lot of cows, typical Fulani families, but yes, that my mom would not give us what we wanted, even though she could afford it. My father passed away quite early, so we grew up in that matrimonial household, right? And our not 7 kids. My sisters already got married, but 5 boys, and like you mentioned, your parent, like being a single mom, she had other responsibilities too, not only me, but yes, actually, when three of us started school, me and my two brothers, we would go to school, and my mom would give us $5 each for three of us during that time, $5 each, and I would take $1, and I would tell them to share the $4.
Mhm.
But by the time I come back from school, I already had other $5 in my pocket, because there were other kids who were not very well off compared to us. We were better in terms of like what we had. But my mom would give us $5 for three of us, and some of the other kids, their parents would give them like $5 each, and my mother would say, "It's not money that teaches you. Like, you don't learn when you have so much money in your pocket
Mhm.
during that time." Okay, we really felt hunger. So at some point, how would I get money? I would be helping other students in class. I'm talking about primary three, four, five. I
Mhm.
would help some of my classmates during that time with small assignments in class. And one would give me like tala, dokan dalasi in there, some would give me $1, and some would buy me a loaf of bread. During that time, you have this long loaf of bread, you cut it in the middle, and then you put like, beans inside, or meatballs or fish ball, they call it that time. We couldn't afford meatballs. So yes, those were the moments that you feel like this is really poverty, right? And yes, this is was inspiring growing up after that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that part of your reality is one that most Gambians perhaps were also experiencing because, Gambia, I always say, is such a small country, and whatever is happening in Banjul is perhaps what is also happening in Sara, Bojo, or somewhere else in the country. They are not so different. It's not so
Mhm,
significantly different, because
mhm,
I think
mhm.
the reality of it is that sometimes that there is struggle and it's not so
Yeah,
distant. You can feel it, you can
yeah,
experience it. But
absolutely.
in terms of the former president, and God bless his soul, may his soul rest in perfect peace, the late
Mhm,
Sadaura Karaba Jawara.
mhm, mhm,
You're not a historian, but where do you think historians would situate or position him, bearing in
mhm,
mind he came to power
mhm,
on the back of colonialism,
mhm,
and when the continent of Africa was struggling with
mhm, mhm,
self-determination,
mhm,
among other things, like you said, the structural
mhm.
adjustment programs and other
Yeah, yeah.
initiatives
Mhm,
that they were imposing on Africa in the guise of African liberation and freedom. And
absolutely,
so the
absolutely.
effects of this until today in some societies still exist. But I'm curious in terms of how our Gambian society is and how we continue to remember and
Mhm,
assess the record and performance of former President Jammeh. How do you
mhm,
think historians would
mhm,
position
mhm,
him when you compare him to his contemporaries that
mhm,
when he was in power were also elsewhere around the African
mhm,
continent?
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I think Jawara was now. I'm not a historian, but of course, if you are a political scientist, you have to have some. You have to read historical backgrounds of individuals, of states formation, and all of that. And I think Jawara historians will likely remember him as a very courteous, very careful leader, right? Than rather than a visionary person. And of course, he when you judge individuals' strengths, when you judge whether people were really good or not, you judge them according to their time, not the time that you are in. So, for example, when we say Abedi Pele was a good footballer, we judge him for the time that he was, the time that he played, not today. You have more skillful people today than he was, right? Now, like I said, he is remembered like that, not the visionary type, but also I think it's important to say that Jawara gave us Jammeh. It is Jawara that created Jammeh. Um, Jawara's limits were personal, not structural. He governed in an era when politics or political imagination of many African states, was extremely constrained. We had wars going on. A lot of countries just gained independence, and they were trying to navigate a very complex system. And also, we gained independence at a time the world was divided into two parts. The Cold War, right? You have the Soviet Union part, you have the American, the Western part. So you either have to choose. But of course, then Gambia was able to join what is called the non-aligned movement, which was very helpful. The non-aligned movement basically means you are not taking side in this war that was going on, the Cold War. You are neither in the Russian side nor in the American side. That was somehow helpful compared to other countries that had to choose side and then end up having wars going on until today. We have the ramification. But yes, he could be remembered like that. And I think the inability to reign onto some of his ministers to minimize corruption in the system was one of the many reasons that created that frustration that brought Jammeh to power. And we've seen that when Jammeh came to power, most of the things that Jammeh did, um, the earliest things that he did when he came to power was to strip off the Kairaba people their wealth, most of them. I think Nyang Yai mentioned this at some point when Jammeh will refer to him as one of the Kairaba boys. And I think I heard Momodu Sabali a couple of days ago, I think yesterday during the QTV interview, he said Gambians complain a lot. And then in that, he also drew a jibe to say that the Kairaba boys, so we still have
Not
that
that often.
mentality. Yes, we still have that mentality going on there, even though it is a fallacy, if you ask me.
And because you mentioned that, and this is not part of our planned discussion, but I think it's important. If you would dilate a little bit on this dichotomy of Karabakh versus the rest of society, and
Mhm,
I've had Talib Bensouda on this platform, and I've gotten in trouble for trying to paint the picture that if you consider somebody like, or if you characterize Talib or people
mhm,
like Talib or other individuals in the society who perhaps are successful, have some
mhm.
what looks like some level of education, have traveled, have come back, but they're still part of the community and they relate with people in the community. Maybe Talib is not even a good example, right? Or, I guess what I'm trying to understand is talk to
Mm,
us a little bit about the idea of political elitism versus elitism itself. If you can
mhm,
break that down for us to understand, because that
mhm.
term is thrown out a lot in the Gambia, and uh,
Yes.
there is a reality I must concede that I think during the Jawara era there was an issue with, obviously a lot of educated people, almost what looks like a state capture and
Mhm,
personalization of, public office for
mhm,
personal benefits and the benefit of their families, croism, nepotism. The list can go
yes.
on and on and on. But what we see right now is there's almost all the time being this title, this word being thrown out all the time.
Entitlement.
Yes, this sense of entitlement, where everybody
Yes.
that we disagree with, you
Mhm,
basically label them as elites, which I
mhm,
think also takes away from the real meaning of what we
mhm,
mean when we talk about, the negative aspects of elitism. But if you would really
mhm,
dial it on that a little bit, I think it will be
mhm.
helpful to our
I
audience.
think this argument falls into different categorization. One of which a lot of the people who don't know me growing up, they consider me. They think I am part of the Kairaba boys because they see I am privileged, but not knowing my humble beginning. I think when you are successful in what you do and you are unapologetic to that, and most of the time people tend to antagonize you or categorize you as the other, and I think the myth of the Kairaba boy is not founded. It's not founded in the sense that we never had a president who is from Kairaba to begin with. Okay, most of our presidents are not from Kairaba, and I'm not sure we ever had a vice president who is born and bred and whose family everyone is from Kairaba. Kairaba is a myth, if you know what I mean. But
Yes.
on the other hand, we during the Jawara's era we had a lot of people in government who used to live in Kairaba, so it also became a created myth, a myth that was created, that was constructed. So we now have this social constructive idea of Kairaba being the place where the looters are. Because you have a lot of ministers living there during that time. So Kairaba would be maybe the I don't know, the Bursubi or the Kerseri or whatever have we right now in the Gambia in many years to come. But I feel like, yes, when you talk about the political elites, you do have those politicians who started from scratch, who started from scratch and made it into politics and became something. You have, I'm not sure we have any politician who inherited their position from their father. This is why I said the Kairaba myth is not founded. And a lot of the ministers who were in politics during the Jawara time, who used to live in Kairaba, most of their sons and daughters are not in politics. Most of them are not in politics. Just the fear of being, labeled as carrying the sin of the father. for some of them, right? So I think that is also a challenge we have there. But when we talk about political elite, somebody can come for it. Barrow today is considered as one of the political elites in the country, even though Barrow is born in Mankunda, a small village of maybe less than 20 compounds, right? Which is divided in the middle by the road, the other side and this side, right? So we have Ahmad Ba, who is also from Nyani, who can be considered as a political elite. So for me, in research, when we talk about political elites, I am not trying to, or we not trying to say, oh, these people are elites in this. But what we're saying is they have a commandeering voice. They have a certain voice that can impact the direction of the politics that we have. This is what we consider as political elites in a sense. So when we talk about political elites, we're not only talking about people in position of power who have political powers, but even Mohammed Jah today can be considered as he's an economy elite, but also a political elite, because a lot of the things that he does can impact the direction of our politics in the country. The Gak guy, and Tough and all these ones. And also even people who are not rich but have commandeering voices. So it's all about power. What power you have. You can be a scholar, an Islamic scholar like, let's say, Imam Fati today is a political elite in a sense, because a lot of the things that he does or says can impact the politics of his followers, right? Can impact the politics of his community or mosque. So yes, we have to decipher that. The Kairaba myth is not founded. Because in Gambia, fortunately, one thing I like about it compared to where I are right now here, is that the elites, no matter how elitist you are, your kids, if you are in Gambia, they go to the same school as a middle class person,
One.
right?
Yeah.
An average Joe in Sanchaba. You probably go to the same restaurant, village, right? You probably go to the same nightclub, yeah, I forgot the nightclubs. Envy, if you want. You probably go to the same beach, So there is no like an exclusive ride, exclusive area or location that is only as frequented by the elites and not the other groups in society. So yes, it's very contested, I would say.
And Ahmad, to that point too, every, I always say this too because I was born in the Gambia. I was literally raised in the Gambia. I spent most of my life in the Gambia until very recently. Is that
Mhm,
everybody in the Gambia is almost the same, like in terms of economic status. That majority of the people are actually poor, right?
mhm,
And there's that level of what Frank Fanon in his book Richard of the Art consider as the proletariat,
mhm,
or even the Lumen proletariat, for example. I had Ali Uba here, and he talked about this very nicely. Is society, majority of the people are struggling, to have bread, to eat. And then you have majority of the people who are even okay in the Gambia are middle class, right?
mhm.
So you have very, very minuscule group of people who have in what we
Mhm.
consider as really material success by
Yes.
various
Yes.
objective standards. And so
Mhm.
when people usually throw this title out, and that's what I said
Mhm.
earlier, I said, if you consider all these people elites in the Gambian society, I said, I'm happy to be called elites, and I'm not even going to apologize for that because our
Apologize. Yes.
understanding of
Yes.
what the concept elitism really means, I think, is highly misconstrued and very misunderstood in the Gambia. And
Mhm.
we propel this idea, like you brilliantly explained, Karaba Avenue versus the rest of society. When
Mhm.
even those accusing Karaba Avenue folks of being elites, Mamadou Sabali, there is nobody more elitist than Mamadou Sabali itself.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
who is fooling who in the Gambian society? Let's have
Mhm.
a genuine and honest conversation about
Mhm.
who we are, about the realities of our political and economic
Mhm.
systems, and
Mhm.
really have genuine conversations about this.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it doesn't do anybody any good for us to just
Mhm.
throw these
Mhm.
political terms out
Mhm.
there to
Mhm.
people just like that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, when you look at Gambian society and also you look at many societies around the world, what you see is, of course, what you have in Gambia is similar to what you have in many parts. Uh, I live in DC, and basically is 30 minutes from the White House. Wherever you live in DC is a small. DC is a small city. Wherever you live, you basically have 30 minutes from where you live to the White House, or maximum 40 minutes. So I'm saying that to say, um, on the other side of the White House, you have the Congress, the Capitol Hill, and all of that. Beneath that, let's say 5 minutes drive from there, you have what is called Southeast, abject poverty, extreme poverty, crime infested. Okay, so when you go to the Gambia, for me, my observation, it's not based on statistic, but just what I observe from, because knowledge can come in different forms, from observation, from statistic, and et cetera, et cetera. In the Gambia, what I see is the middle class is growing. Okay, the middle class is growing, but still we have those at the bottom who are stagnant, and those are absolutely struggling, and we cannot take away the fact that a lot of them are struggling today. But we have a lot of people from the middle class who have progressed so much. They build their homes, and they never left the Gambia. They're doing very well in terms of business, and of course, when the middle class grows, it is good for the economy, because then, somehow it's better the middle class to grow than for the higher class, which I don't want to use the term, I don't want to use as well. Because there is a fusion of the middle class and the upper class. Like I said, we all go to the same places, we all go to the same school, we probably buy, because you don't have a market in Gambia where you can buy, as far as I know, where you feel like the price of goods vary so exponentially
Yes.
that only the rich can afford it. Okay, so if we talk about a loaf of bread, if a loaf of bread is $10, um, maybe you can have it for 13 or 14 or 15, right? But the same loaf of bread is being bought by the extremely rich person, and also the middle class person, and the poor person. So it's not like, yeah, in the US, where you say, oh, whole food is expensive. You have to have some money in your pocket to go there. I am gonna go to Lidl, right? Or I am gonna go to Aldi, or all of those ones. So we don't have that kind of polarization, if you want, or a division in the context that we have here in America compared to the Gambia.
So we're going to move on. I'm sure this conversation will continue to evolve, and hopefully, we'll spend a lot more time in the future to talk about it. But we're going to move to another continent. We started obviously in Africa, Gambia, and now we're going to get into another part of your life, which is in Sweden. If you would really walk us through how did that come about? You're moving
Hmm.
to Sweden,
Hmm.
and what level did you start developing interest in studying geopolitics, political
Yeah,
and economic systems
yeah,
and
yeah.
foreign
Hmm.
policy,
Yeah.
migration, among
Hmm.
others, including
Yeah.
conflicts in the African continent? You are an
Hmm.
expert in the Casamas region conflict that have been there for a very long time now, and you've written about it, you've talked about it publicly as well. Where did those interests, how did they come about?
Yes, I mean, so like many people in the Gambia, growing up, you probably wanted to be a lawyer, right? So when I went to high school, whenever we played, I used to be in the drama club of my high school. And I remember I think one of my proudest moment of high school is when we actually defeated Nusrat in the inter-school um, debate competition, which I participated, right? And
Wow.
and then I used to be, yes, I
Good
used
in
to
my
be,
school. Crazy, bro. Nobody defeats
yeah,
us.
yeah, we defeated them. I think 2000 and I think 8 or 9. I can't. No, no. I think 7 or 8, something like that.
Wow.
So what happened growing up during that time? You wanted to become a lawyer, but my mom was like, "Nah, it's not. It's unethical." This is what they consider to you studying law now. I don't know how your parents let you study law, but of course you are here. You can tell them you are doing engineering. They
Yes.
probably wouldn't know.
True. It's true. It's
So
true.
yes. So I wanted to study law, and then people were saying, it's unethical, you don't do that, so on and so forth. I'm like, okay, I cannot withstand blood. So I was like, nah, no, medical school is not for me. I cannot. When I cannot even slaughter a chicken, I cannot do that. So moving to Sweden, I moved to Sweden with my high school degree. And when I arrived, they were like, "Oh, if you want to go to university, your level of Swedish has to be the same level as native speakers." Imagine somebody who only knew only one word in Swedish, which is "gumorgon," which is good morning, right? Very close to English. So I had to like go to school to learn Swedish. I learned Swedish, and then when I finished my Swedish school, they call it SFI, Svenska för invandrare, Swedish for immigrant. I finished that, and then I had to get the high school requirement to go to the Swedish high school requirement to go to university to do my bachelor's. And imagine my bachelor's was gonna be in Swedish and English. Okay, most of the literature was gonna be in Swedish. For somebody who just got to this country 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Now we are going to university to study in Swedish in a language that was foreign to you 3 years, 2 years, 3 years ago. So I did that. I studied. I wanted two things when growing up: law or international relations. I wanted to work on diplomacy and all of that. So I did international relations, a bachelor's in Falun. So I would go home in the evening, reading my huge text and then trying to translate this into English to understand. And it was not an easy task, I have to tell you. But later on, I started to develop this idea of China-Africa relationship.
Mhm.
For a very long time, I was doing China-Africa relationship. So when I was doing my bachelor's, there is in Europe, there is what is called Erasmus study abroad, Erasmus study abroad, which is a fellowship that you can get to study abroad, depending on what university relationship your university has, what relationship your university has with other institutions. So I went to Oxford. I studied the UK for almost a year. Then I came back. I wrote my thesis, and I moved to Uppsala, which is 3 hours, 4 hours away from that place. I went in to do political science, but again, my formative years in Uppsala. Uppsala is one of the greatest universities in Scandinavia. It is in Scandinavia. It's a good one. Everyone wanna it's well respected. It started in 1477.
Wow.
That tells you that it's an old university. So yeah, political science. But then again, being the only black person in class, never having a black professor, that was itself challenging to the mind. It's an identity crisis. You needed to have inspiration from somebody who looks like you. You needed to have a push, somebody in the same class with you who looks like you, who can push you. Just to tell you that it is important when you have, we in the West,
Representation.
yeah. If you have
Representation.
education, if you are in university, it's good to see somebody who looks like you.
Yes.
Okay. So if you have kids in this country and you want to send them to a school, make sure they go to a school where at least you have some people who look like them. Okay. I know a lot of Gambians who be like, I am the only white person in my class or in my university. That itself, it's a problem. Okay, because that itself is a problem in the sense that you don't I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't feel like I was getting what I wanted. I didn't feel like I had an ally in both in my in the courts, but also in the university, given the fact that I never had a black professor in the Department of Government in Uppsala University. So that was itself challenging because a lot of the immigrant kids, or the diaspora kids were studying medicine. They were in the pharmacy department, studying either they wanted to be dentists or surgeons or something. I didn't have the brain to do that, unfortunately. So yes, it was a challenge in Uppsala, and Sweden gave me distance. By that I mean, distance produces clarity. It allowed me to see African politics both from within live experience and from outside this analytical framework. So the challenge wasn't just the Western academia per se, but ensuring African realities were not just woven, flattened into abstract categories. So I learned to negotiate my way rather than reject it, and those institutions were really inspiring.
So, in also one of your academic journals, you make the case that Africa, given its trajectory, which I suspect is as regards to colonialism that it endured
Mhm.
for a very long time, has
Yeah.
fared better comparatively to other places around the world. And I think the name of the
Mhm.
article is "From 1960 to 2000: The Evolution of Political Integration and Democracy in Africa."
Yes.
Talk to us
Mhm.
briefly. What was this? What is this grounded on? Without
Yes.
the risk of the romanticization of or
Of
looking,
yes,
you
yes,
know. So
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. We have challenges on the continent. We definitely have challenges, just like many parts of the world right now. But I do believe that there was this professor. It was in a Zoom call. I remember a few years ago. He said Nigeria was more democratic than it should be, and this got me thinking, what do you mean? But over the years, when I look at it, I realized that, yeah, maybe he was right. So what I mean by Africa has fared very well compared to many parts of the world. Now, um, Ghana was technically one of the first African countries to gain independence. Okay, around 58, I think 57, 58.
Why do you use the term technically?
Because we had I think what is it called, Guinea. I don't know, Guinea is 57. I cannot remember which one came first. And also of course we have Liberia, where people say wasn't colonized, okay, which technically also is a question, a very interesting question, because Liberia of course is a colonial settlement, which was created by the American Colonization Society, which sent free black slaves to Africa, because they saw what was going on in Haiti. They saw the revolution going on in Haiti and other places. They didn't want to have a revolution in America. Slavery has just ended, and a lot of black people were unemployed. What are we going to do with them? They send them to Africa and find them a place. This is how they ended up in Liberia. First in Sierra Leone, a lot of them died, and then they sent another batch also from London, and then they ended up in Sierra Leone. So, and when they came, the black slaves, ex-slaves, when they came to Sierra Leone, um, through the help of the American government that time, they committed genocide and killed a lot of the natives in order to build the nation, what is known as Liberia today. There was a civil war supported by American corporations during that time. So now let's not deviate. Let's continue from. Let's continue on this. So Africa, let's say Africa gained independence 60s. Let's just say 60s as an example. 60s to today is not a very long time. It's not even 100 years, right? Um, America had to gain independence 300 years before a lot of people could get the rights to vote. A lot of black women only got the right to vote in America in the 60s after the civil rights movements. Okay? And it had been an existing democracy long before that time. Africa is the only continent that started its democratic path with universal suffrage. That is to say, everybody has the right to vote, as far as I know. In many Africa, when Gambia gained independence in '65, did they say that somebody else that is not going to vote because they don't have land? They didn't say that. Did they say somebody else that is not going to vote because they had a prison record? They didn't say that. Okay. Did they say, oh, this person is not going to vote because he's a woman? No, I cannot remember any African countries that put a restriction on individuals based on their gender or based on the history or whatever in terms of voting. Many Western countries, the earliest Western country that allowed women voting is, I think, Australia or New Zealand or Sweden, 1921, around that time. And these were existing democracies since in the 1800s. You understand what I mean?
Yes.
So in 1900, Sweden was already a flourishing democracy. In 1900, in 1900, almost two quarter of the Swedish population left Sweden for three reasons. One, they were not free to join what is called the free church. They were not free to choose their religion, and you call yourself democracy. Number two, they were not free to choose their sexual partner, and you call yourself democracy. Three, there was abject poverty. They left Sweden to settle in the United States. A lot of them today are in Minnesota. If you go to Minnesota, they have a huge Swedish white population there. Now, I'm saying this to say, within 60 years, within 70 years, many African countries were able to rebuild their institutions. And many African countries were able to conduct free and fair elections. You can quote me on that. And many African countries were able to change governments, like Senegal, for example, peacefully. Ghana, even though you had periods of coup d'etats and all of that in Nigeria and all those countries, but still, I think compared to many parts of the world, compared to many continents, Africa is the only continent I would say that from independence to date has had universal suffrage. That is to say, everybody has the right to vote, depending, of course, on the age, um, compared to many parts of the world. So I think we've done pretty much, if you compare us to other parts of the world. Now, are we supposed to do better than what we are today? Yes, we're probably going to get to that.
And so you also mentioned very briefly about indigenous people who were massacred in Liberia.
Mhm,
And so, and part of your work, you put a lot of emphasis on African epistemology. And
mhm,
I would like you to talk to us a little bit about why the emphasis on African epistemology, and
mhm,
how do you also define that? What does it
mhm,
mean to you?
mhm. So, in when we talk about epistemology in the African context, it's more of ngamunelong. What do we know? What do we know about what do we know? Ngamunelong. So, for example, I'm going to give you a simple example. A goat goes missing in the village.
Mhm.
Okay, a goat is missing. We don't call the police. We don't look at the CCTV cameras. What do? We call for a meeting in the village Bantaba and then say, which household has been restless these days? Number one. Number two, which place is cooking meat? Who slaughter? Who had dinner? Who had meat? For dinner last night, or who had meat for dinner for lunch today? So it's more about collective knowledge. Ngamuna long. What do we know? How do we know this? So it's like, what do we know? Okay. So it's about that collective idea of knowledge. Knowledge is not, it's not supposed to be individual. It's supposed to be collective. It's supposed to be it can come from storytelling, telling. It can come from books. It can come from different areas. So, for example, when you go to Birkama, and you probably talk to your grandma, you want to do research about Birkama. Your grandma is still can remember a lot of things about Birkama, and she tells you all these stories about Birkama growing up. And you write it on paper. You go to the West, you need a publisher. They would ask you, who is your source? My grandma is my source. Nah, it's not authentic. It's a problem.
Yeah.
That itself is a problem. Why isn't it not authentic? Why is storytelling not authentic?
Mhm.
Just because you say it's not authentic. Why? Because the West colonized knowledge, they colonize what is authentic and what is not. And this is what I mean by Africa has to control the narrative and move away from that. This is what we mean by African epistemology. You challenge the existing knowledge, but also the existing judgment of what is authentic and not.
What's the continuing struggle of African stories? And we talked about this very briefly on the phone too. The struggle of
Mhm,
African stories being narrated through Eurocentric voices or views. I think somebody also highlighted it on the comment section to
mhm,
Ndeiramo.
mhm,
Um, and more African intellectuals trying to narrate African stories through African lived experiences. I think
mhm,
that's something that is extremely important. So
mhm,
in your line of work, how do you guys continue to put emphasis on that and to situate, for example, the power of griots, for example,
mhm,
Najalulu,
mhm,
Milialonko,
mhm.
they are an institution. It's almost like a standing
Absolutely,
library in our communal
absolutely,
setting in the African
absolutely,
context. And so they're
absolutely.
fading out in terms of their role. I don't know if you realize it, but I had one of the dudes here a few days ago. He comes from a traditional Jali family, and I was talking to him about the role that his late dad used to play
Mhm,
in our community in football banda. That's the person
mhm,
that will call to say that, hey, the
mhm,
Karinin Karala football banda, they quietly go into the households. When
mhm.
somebody steals, you don't use the institution of justice to hold that person
Right.
accountable because the
Mhm,
punitive justice system do not, in fact,
mhm,
guarantee
mhm.
reforming of that individual who has committed the crime. It just
Yeah.
continues. That crime is more likely going to happen again. And
Mhm,
so
mhm,
I'm curious, where do our communal institutional system that have continued to be the fabric of our society and
mhm,
the thread that keeps us together, how
mhm,
significant are they in the line of work that you and colleagues in your line of work are focusing on
mhm,
right now?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, look, there is when you look at justice in Africa, especially when they established the transitional justice, which you worked on with, I think the internal transitional justice in Africa is not based on punishment; it's based on restoration. Okay, we restore dignity of the person. I'm going to give you an example of how Africa's traditional epistemic knowledge would frame this. Mofulole Sonkota,
Mhm.
when they quarrel, the person who was winning, um, he kept quiet. And then Dole Anyininka, but you were winning. Why did you keep quiet? He said, if I keep talking, that will not bring peace. You understand?
Yes.
So that is important. One, two. We have a challenge on the continent, and the challenge we have is the institutions that we build in terms of how the state should be run. Those institutions are not responding to some of our traditional values and ways of living,
Mhm.
like the role of the griot. If you look at Usman Semben, he is today celebrated in the West more than he is celebrated in Africa.
Yes.
Every great university you go to in America or in Europe, where they have either literature or African studies or anything related to that, there are books about Usman Semben. Not many Gambians know Usman Semben today in the University of the Gambia. Maybe those doing literature. So I'm saying that to say, of course, it is the responsibility of the Jali to narrate. Okay, that is what he has to do. Now, it is the responsibility of scholars of institutions to put this into writings so that generations upon generations will learn. Okay, the Jali has done their part. It is the responsibility of society to put this into text, to put this into museums or what have we, and then learn. And like you said, that part of the griot has also been taken away, because right now, Nimo Sonkota, when people quarrel or they fought, um, they tend to rely more on the Western part of justice. Wolem ko we go to the court
Mhm.
or we go to the police, etc., etc. Instead of bringing the elders in the family to sit, because people are after the truth, not after restoration. When you seek in the truth, then you go to the institutions that are built by colonialism to seek, because those institutions are built for that. But
Yeah.
if you seek peace and restoration and dignity and all of that, you go to the traditional institutions,
Mhm.
and you bring the family together and you talk. But a lot of the time, people, because there are many options out there when it comes to relationship or what have you, people are not working on certain things. They just opt out. But I'm out.
And Ahmad, also, the idea of how we view, for example, like individuals like that who have not been through, and I talked about this also on one of the episodes on the podcast. Who, if you've not been through the formal Western education system, and
Mhm,
somebody like those traditional folks, our alkalulu or
mhm,
imamulu in our communities,
mhm,
or say, for example, our jalil, because
mhm,
they've not been through school, they are
mhm.
viewed at a more or less unfavorable lens compared to somebody like you and I who went to
Exactly.
prestigious universities in the West, were educated. But I think they get lost in the conversation only
Mhm,
because they are not formally
mhm.
educated, and we lose
Yes.
sight of the fact that these people
Mhm,
have wisdom, one that by virtue of their life experiences and because of where they're from, is one that
yeah.
we'll perhaps never have. And
Yeah.
so, because
Yeah.
we've not authenticated that, like you said, it's the role of now the intellectuals to go and sort of systemize that information and use it to benefit
Exactly.
society. But we don't,
Exactly.
right? And so, I'm curious,
Exactly.
though, to what extent would you say that Gambian researchers and political experts or people who are interested in understanding our history to look into this area to benefit,
Mhm,
because we are
mhm.
losing a very important part of our society. I'm young.
Absolutely.
If I want
Absolutely.
to understand certain things now, I
Mhm.
talked to Hasum Cisse not long ago. I told
Mhm.
him I want to have him on the platform because there's a
Yeah.
lot that I want to
Mhm.
understand. And out of that
Absolutely.
curiosity for knowledge, I want to have him on,
Mhm.
and a few other people too. But there's a lot of my folks like me that sometimes when I talk to about certain things,
Mhm.
they're almost blown away because of the
Mhm.
sheer ignorance that, and also
Mhm.
lack of
Mhm.
interest to understand the things that define us as Gambians. So what would you
Absolutely.
say to people who are young, who needs to understand
Mhm.
our identity, where we come from, the power of our
Mhm.
stories, the power of
Mhm.
the institutions, the
Mhm. I think Ibrahim, are you there?
yes, I'm
Oh,
here.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
all right. I think one thing is important, or two things. One is reading and listening. Um, uh, as a country, we need to have a national project in trying to restore this thing that you just mentioned. When you look at Senegal, the when Senghor came to power, as a culturalist, he's a culturalist, Senghor. When he came to power, he had this idea of the Renaissance. Okay, of course, coming from the Negritude movement with MSSR, Leon Damas, and all these sorts. He had the Renaissance idea. So I don't know if you see the this monument in Dakar that is built in Dakar.
Yes, I
This
see.
was Senghor's idea. These ideas were laid in the 50s and 60s. Okay, these were Senghor's ideas that Abdullah Wada helped materialize. Okay, so they had a project, and that is revival of the national culture of Senegal. We need to start from there as a country to begin with. Now, the other thing that just escaped my train of thought is the idea of listening. I do listen to Lalo Keba Drame a lot,
Lalo
and
Keba.
and yes, if you just put Lalo Keba Drame into a book, you get so much. Now, I'm saying that to say a Senegalese person told me, I don't know, he's an elderly person, and I believe in elderly, knowledge. It's an epistemology that I rely on a lot of the time until proven otherwise. He said when the coup d'etat happened in Gambia in 80, when Abdou Diouf went to Senegal, the Senegalese president then, when Jawara went to Senegal, sorry, excuse me, when Jawara went to Senegal to Abdou Diouf, Early in the morning, Abdul Juf was playing Lalo Keba Drame, and according to this man, Jawara was crying that morning. It's like, what's going on? Um, Jawara said he used to listen to Lalo Kebadrame every morning before he even meets his advisors.
Wow.
So those are things that we do not like have today. We A lot of people don't know who Lalo Kebadrame is. Maybe through out of curiosity, people like you and I, sometimes we get bored here, and then we play something that reminds us of home, right? And back home, my brother would never play that. And we have a lot of people like that in the Gambia, in the Senegambian region. But because we neglected their part in our nation building, we
Mhm.
neglected that voice, that traditional voice in our nation building, then we are still struggling to define ourselves, and this is a problem. And I think, like I said, we have to have a national project, the National Arts and Culture Council of Arts and Culture.
Mhm.
I don't know what they have going on right now, but my professor, my who's also was a mentor of mine who passed away a couple of years ago, Professor Mbaicham, here at Howard University. He was working on a project, on many projects. One of which is the life of Ibu Silla, which was actually I think launched in the Gambia in December. So we need like to control the narrative of our history and bring back those stories. They are really really important. They help define us. They help us, forge a way forward and build a national identity. Gambia is one of the smallest countries on mainland Africa, right? But it is one of also, the countries where we don't have a national identity moving forward.
And I cannot help but remember that you, at this juncture, currently you are a doctoral fellow at Howard University, which is a prestigious university, very revered and respected around the world, but also means a lot for a lot of people of color here in
Mhm.
the United States. I think a lot of people would suffice to say that it's the maker of universities for Black people here in the US.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's also the university that Halifa Saleh actually studied. For those of you who are interested, where Halifa actually studied, Halifa also did his, I think, one of his degrees, perhaps his master's degree in at the University of Howard. But I raised that because while you are at it on Senegal, to
Hmm.
ask you to speak to us briefly about the impact the late Sheikh Anta Job has in departments like yours,
Hmm.
departments of African studies, or
Hmm.
people that are interested in that aspect
Hmm.
of public work. And
Yeah,
because Sheikh Anta
yeah.
Job wrote, I mean, wonderfully, I read his book on the origin of civilization,
Hmm.
and how he was able to make the case for Africa being the home of civilization. um,
Hmm.
I mean, a position that was widely contested. I think it still is until today, but I think
Absolutely,
you can
absolutely.
argue against the facts, and he
Hmm.
presented very compelling arguments as to
Hmm.
why
Hmm.
that is the case. But
Hmm.
those are Africans who are celebrated, around the world,
Absolutely.
including here in
Hmm.
the United States. What is
Hmm.
his influence in some of the departments or people
Hmm.
that you work with in this line that you are involved in?
Yes, I mean, in every conversation at Howard University, like you said, it's a HBCU, historically Black university. Um, Seante Job is one of the household names in many Black universities in the United States, and um, Seante Job's Seante Job's work, what it does to Africans in the diaspora is that it gives you more, um, it restores a sense of pride in you as an African, because he talks about the fact that no, it is not the Arab, it is actually the African that is the mother of civilization. and he made this argument, which actually was bolstered by a lot of other people later on, is that the today when I think when you read history, they tell you, oh, the Arab invasion of Spain. Some people would say the North African invasion of Spain. But have you heard them say the black invasion of Spain? No. Those Arabs were not Arabs. They were black from North Africa. But because the white people control the narrative of what we read, instead of putting the black invasion of Spain to give credentials to black people, they would say the Arab invasion of Spain. And now, historically, they are moving Egypt. They say the Egyptian civilization. It is not the Egyptian civilization. It is the black civilization, because the inhabitant of that period, of that region during that time were black. And this is the argument that Sir Antajob raised in his various work that led to him being banned in many Western institutions, he actually was not allowed to travel to the US at a certain point, was also in conflict with Senghor at some point in Senegal. But again, who was married to a white woman. So yes, I feel like he restored some pride, just like Marcus Garvey and I would say Dubois and James Baldwin, who were also great writers at the time, and of course the Negritude movement and all these people. They restore a lot of pride in black people historically, wherever you've been, out of the continent, because their work challenge the Western way of knowing, the epistemology that the West rely on to subjugate us intellectually, culturally, and historically. And that is important to know. And I think people like that are really important to be taught in many African schools. And what I realize is a lot of these authors, you learn about them when you left the continent.
Yes.
And I don't understand why in African departments, political science departments in Africa, we are not teaching them. Instead, you are teaching Karl Marx, you are teaching Friedrich Engels, you are teaching Victor Hugo, and all these ones, instead of teaching the African intellectuals.
And I want to bring this home very quickly as well, in terms of Gambian intellectuals who, in some way, shape, or form, have had impact or influence in your line of work. And, there are very brilliant ones that here in America, both gone and also, I think, perhaps present, that I know, but at least for me, that I look up to, and I also widely admire their work and their public commentary.
Mhm.
Professor Ablaisen is one individual that
Mhm.
I follow a lot and admire and respect. But
Yeah,
do you
yeah.
have figures or Gambian intellectuals, past or present, that have influenced some of the work that you do, or some of their findings, or some of their research work or publications that you rely on heavily, or even some of I mean their principles or public intellectualism that you sort of
Mhm. Mhm.
incorporate in your line of work? Are there any?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would think of Tijan M. Salah. He's great. Of course, Professor Abdullah Sen, who is now in the Gambia running the Sane Nyang Institute, is also great. Both Sane and Nyang were at Howard as well. So yeah, I read a lot of Professor Sen. Met him in person. I have great respect for him as a scholar, as an intellectual of Gambian history, Gambian politics. But like I said, I think we this is actually common in many among many Gambians. Growing up, you only read Foroya most of the
Yeah.
time. Like when I used to go to school in Canifim, I would buy the Foroya newspaper in the morning. While in those gele I would just stop through the window and get get a paper, and my teachers that time, they would borrow it, and some of my friends, they would borrow the foreign newspaper, but as soon as they hold it, they turn to the back page where there is sport,
Yeah.
football. So yes, the inspiration, I would say, honestly, came. I think my inspiration is mostly from the African American diaspora, from the African diaspora outside the continent. Professor John Henry Clark, who is a great inspiration, whom you can read a lot and you can listen to on the internet. He's great. But yes, I am inspired. Not I haven't read a lot of Gambians, to be honest. I read Lenry Peter, but Tijan M. Sala work I have read. Professor Abdullah Sen, of course. I have also read the work of Bine Minte,
Benedict.
my good friend at Salem. All these inspiring people who have written extensively. But you can have somebody who is in your generation and they also inspire
Yes.
you, and people like Said Mati, is my generation. He's doing very good, and
I
I
had
am
him. I
inspired
had
by
him
his
here.
work. Yes. Yes, I listened to him, his Bakau story, and all of
Yes.
that. So I wanted to ask him if he knows how to do farming, but I don't think he knows. But anyway, people like that are inspiring. The likes of Nyanjai. Not probably what they have written, but some of the things that they have said here and there. You get inspiration from. So when you look at my book itself, most of the stories, drawn from my meeting with people. Even this conversation, I can turn this into a story, into a fictitious one that is very inspiring to you and a lot of other readers out there. So yes, I feel like you don't have to be much older and gray hair for me to learn one or two things from you. I'm inspired by a lot of young Gambians too, who are doing wonders around the world. Some of whom were my juniors. They would call me when they were doing their master's thesis and work, and I would have done just having that conversation with them. Would give inspiration to a lot of things.
Now, also, you put a lot of you look a lot into foreign policy, for example, as part of your work, and you did talk about that part of your very early work in Sweden was looking at China-Africa relations, which is still a big
Mhm.
issue that is happening. I think the continent of Africa almost feels like it's up for grabs between the various, uh, superpowers or so-called,
Mm.
global powerhouses. But if you would spend some time really to talk to us about, the dynamism of the global power forces that's happening right
Mhm.
now and the shifting of power too, or what
Mhm.
looks like shifting of power
Yeah.
from one hand to another, um, in light of
Mhm.
what's been going on around the world. And I
Yeah.
asked that
Yeah.
specifically to understand where does Africa as a
Mhm.
continent fit into what is happening around the
Mhm.
world, considering that
Mhm.
on one hand you have the United States empire that have been so, I mean, obviously, every empire rises and falls. We had the Soviet Union, we
Absolutely.
have the United States empire, which is it's still here, it's
Mhm.
still very dominant, and what looks
Mhm.
like or has been considered an emerging power, I think they are really a force to be reckoned with right now, which is China. And you would be foolish to
Mhm.
not see that or not to acknowledge what is happening around the world
Yeah.
right now. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
what does Africa fit into what is happening currently in the geopolitics?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you mention all that, China and of course the US, and I think a great statement you made is that great power rise and fall. Great powers rise and fall, and we had the British before the Second World War. We had the Portuguese, we had the Dutch. All of them were at some point great powers around the world. And I think Robert Cox was one of the authors of this, and they did mention that the longevity of great powers is 80 years, and then from the 80 to the 90 years they start to wane and fall, and the US has reached that mark actually. So I'm saying that to say we don't live in a unipolar world anymore, and even a bipolar world where you have the Soviet Union and the US. We what we have is kind of a multipolar world in a sense, where also you don't have only one country that is projecting its influence around the world, but a collection of countries. Okay, like the BRICS. You have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and in South Africa. Now, and then you have the European Union as a bloc as well, which is very influential. Now, where does Africa lie on this? For me, I see the continent, of course, having different foreign policies, each trying to navigate its own interests, navigate through a complex system. But what I see is Africa is no longer choosing sides. It's not like you either you have to be with us or you are on the other side. Like Bush famous frame in the aftermath of the 9/11. You're either with us or with the enemy. So Africa is not falling for that anymore. What is happening is that African countries are choosing leverage. Who is able to give me what I need? Because sitting African presidents are also feeling the stench of their population. They are forced to deliver, they are forced to leverage. Okay, I heard somebody was saying a couple of days ago, I think on QTV, that a lot of the road projects that we have in the Gambia are gift from the Chinese. If that is so, then Gambia has pursued a very good strategy in terms of switching from Taiwan to China, which is very contentious as well, if you ask me. Now, like I said, the era of unipolar dependency is over. And African countries, I think most countries around the world are aware of this. So African countries, especially smaller ones, are learning to navigate the global competition strategically and even if imperfectly. And I think small countries like the Gambia joining in national organizations, the leverage that you have, because you always have this vote, which is very powerful, that you can use, to leverage. To get what you want in the national system, because we don't have natural resources, even though we are strategically located. But I don't know if even though we are strategically located, but if you look at our airspace, it's mostly owned by Senegalese. Because when you fly from Yundum Airport, I think 5 minutes into the air, you are in Senegalese airspace almost. So that is to say that we don't have so much to offer in terms of that strategic location. Now, the real question is whether foreign policy serves domestic transformations or merely elite transformation, and that is something that is debatable in a sense. But what I'm saying is African countries are no longer willing to be fed. They are no longer accepting to be, a lot of countries no longer accepting to just be led like cows. They are trying to leverage their potential. They're trying to establish some agency in order to also transform their societies. So that's important to know.
Now, Ahmad, and a lot of academics too try to stay away from this issue, but I think there is a rising number of public intellectuals now, which well, I talked to LJ Lamin Jedawa yesterday, and he said to me poignantly that you use the term public intellectual. That's not common in the Gambia. He said people don't use that term, in the Gambian context a lot. But I think suffice is to say that you are a public intellectual, and if you would sort of delineate what that looks like between just being purely academic, where you involve in research and publication and teaching, and being a public intellectual,
Absolutely.
and why you just refuse to, well, not refuse, but why you choose to do both. Because you've been talking since for a very long time in the game. You've been writing, especially during the Jammeh time. You've been on Al Jazeera. You've been on
Mhm.
public platforms
Yeah.
to do
Mhm.
somewhat an advocacy on what's happening back home, uh,
Mhm.
using your power and your knowledge and your research to
Mhm.
provide a context of what's
Absolutely.
happening. But if you would really talk a
Mhm.
little bit about both, because
Mhm.
public
Mhm.
intellectualism is very prominent in Western societies, including the
Mhm.
United States. You see the likes of
Absolutely.
Professor Jeffrey Sass.
Mhm.
You see the likes of Joy
Mhm.
Meishammer,
Absolutely.
Wolf, a lot of other people who are
Mhm.
involved in this. They're prominent in academia, but
Mhm.
also, and my favorite too,
Mhm.
Dr. Cornel West of Princeton.
Cornel
Yes.
West, yes. Yes.
So Gambia is not so much. Would you talk a little bit
Mhm.
about this?
Yes, I think when we talk about public intellectuals and we talk about academics, these are two different things. An academic is somebody who is at a university and is writing and publishing articles for the advancement of their career or whatever, what have you. A public intellectual is somebody who is an intellectual who has both an academic but also an intellectual who has refused to be sold to power. You know what I mean? Who has refused what we call some people call it, maybe not for the audience, but intellectual prostitution. You're not selling your soul to any power just because you're interested in. Of course, we have things like that. Now, what a lot of people probably don't even know, they will be like, "Oh, where were you?" I have been writing since Jammeh was in power. Um, I think one time when Jammeh was campaigning and said to Kiang that the electricity would fly over your village, I will not give you electricity to a village in Kiang. I wrote about that, and I was still in the Gambia when I wrote about that, and it was also a controversial article. That is why I said, Jammeh's rhetoric was contrary to his vision 2020. So I have been writing articles about Jammeh for quite a long time, even when I was around. So I didn't do that because I wanted to was interested in anything, but I thought that was what I owe to my society to discuss, to expose certain contradictions, certain dialectical elements within the society that would benefit one or two persons, either in the Gambia or outside the Gambia. So the public intellectual is the person who speaks out, who writes about injustice, okay, in society. They're not doing that because of their own personal or professional interest, but they're doing that purely based on ethical ground. And I think that is important. We do have people like that in the Gambian space, but unfortunately, we do have a lot of others also who have fallen victims of being so easily manipulated by those in power, and that is very unfortunate. So, as a public intellectual, you don't even have to have a PhD or what have you. Just be aware of what you're saying, and be ethical, and try to fight for injustices and all of that. That's then you are a public intellectual. The academic, on the other hand, like I mentioned earlier, is different. But again, I remember in 2014 when we were campaigning for Yahya Jammeh to leave power, we had a conference in Stockholm, which I chaired. It's called the Gambian Youth Conference in Stockholm, where we had the people like Babunjai Sala and Gaindemba, whose passport was seized recently at the airport, Ismail Assar, and a few others who flew from Denmark, from England, Scotland, and they came to the meeting. All these people were doing that not because they wanted any position in whatever government would follow, but they were doing that for the love of the country. So it is important that we do not only try to take the time to feel like, oh, you have to be highly intellectual to be a public intellectual.
Your book, it's a brilliant book, by the way. Again, if you're
Thank you.
interested in Amat's book, Between Two Horizons is available on Amazon and also on eBay, but you can also reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with Ahmad and he can get you the book. He sent me a signed copy, by the way. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed reading the book. My wife also
Thank
read
you.
a few chapters of it and she actually really
Thank you.
enjoyed it as well. And so I have some questions basically that I really
Yes.
want us to get into about the book. Again, you can
Yeah.
see it. We have it here. Ahmad also has a copy. We're not going to get in too much into detail about it, but talk to us about the genesis
No,
of the book.
absolutely.
How did this come about? Between Two Horizons, what is it about?
Yes.
The decision to also write a combination of fiction and also lived experiences, which essentially means
Mm,
that there are parts of the book
mm,
that are not reality, but there are
yes.
aspects of it also, just to break this down for our audience who don't understand the combination, there are aspects of it that
Yeah.
are actually
Yeah.
true. But I can also
Yeah.
confidently tell you, for somebody who has read the book, there are several aspects of this book that are so relatable, especially for some of us
Yes.
who live outside the Gambia and go back to
Yes.
Gambia, and the struggle for identity, the struggle for conformity, the struggle for race, and all these existential questions that you are faced with in this sort
Yes.
of settings, social settings
Mm-hmm.
that are things that he addressed in this book.
Mm-hmm.
But talk to us very briefly
Mm-hmm.
about how did this book come about?
Yes, the idea of the book actually came about 10 years ago, or even more than 10 years ago. I would say 11, 12 years ago. I actually started writing the first chapter, um, I think back in 2010. So that's quite a long time, if you ask me, for many people. Now, because some truths cannot be captured in academic prose, right? You 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 have to write something. So the book emerged from the realization that migration, memory, and belonging are emotionals, okay, or are emotional as much as political experience. Now, fictions allow you, or it allows you to explore ambiguity, like something statistic and theory often struggle with. One of which is when the World Bank talks about poverty in Gambia, um, they probably would go to a village and say, let's say they go to Brikama and say, oh, okay, Brikama 500 people. How many of you, because in the World Bank, you have to be able to, you have to spend, I think, um, $2 a day, maybe, or something like that, in order to not be counted as
Okay.
poor. Now they go to Brikama and say, Brikama, 500 people. How many of you spend $2 a day? Yeah, five people raise their hands. We spend $2 a day. Okay, yeah, $2 a day. Okay, all right. Then the rest are poor. The rest of the population, the rest of the 500, they consider poor. Now, the problem with that is in a place like Brikama, some people have their farm produce. Some people have their sheeps or what have you. Okay, Brikama has now developed. We used to joke about that, me and Taco Bayon or the others.
I'm from
Brikama, Sateba, Konyeko, Brikama Sateba to sign. And the husband, Vincent, would be like, Brikama is a village because Vincent is from Banjul, you know. So now I'm just giving this example to say that Brikama has now developed. So Brikama call, please
we are
forgive
Dubai.
me. So maybe I
I'm
should
from
give.
Dubai, bro.
Yes, I know. Maybe I should give another village as an example where they have sheep and goats and all of that. So these people, when you have sheep and goats and you have your garden, you have all this farm produce, you don't need to spend money. You don't need to spend $2 a day. You probably spend 50 cents a day. But you are considered poor because your money is not in a bank account and you are not spending this money every day. You don't need that. But this is where we get it wrong. So this is why when they say poverty, usually I say poverty is relative. So you forgot that a lot of these people actually have so much money that they don't even want to use every day. They don't use every day. Okay? Because they don't need to buy jumbo, they don't need to buy new, they don't need to buy a lot of things They probably go and get it from the water. They probably go to their gardens and get all those things. Now, how can you count them as poor? So this is the challenge. Like, I am trying to challenge Western epistemology, Western way of knowing, the Western methodology of doing research. Okay, so the book, when you look at it, uh, I made this so fictitious, and I made it also so real that when you look at it, you realize that, oh wow, okay, I didn't think about this part. I didn't think it like this. But yes, it is, I would say, interesting when you read it, especially, like I said, a lot of Gambians can relate to a lot of the things that have been said or written in the book.
And the book also covers from the story. It's almost like yourself in the book, but not yourself
Mhm.
also in some respect because of the age
Yeah,
variations among other issues.
yeah.
But it sort of tracks the main character from Gambia all the way to I think Mauritania and Senegal, and then all the way to Sweden and then United
Mhm.
States and back to Gambia again. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
if you talk to us, there's a chapter in the book, I think chapter 10, which you've also said is your
Mhm.
favorite chapter too, where you talk a lot
Yes.
about, the idea of resettling in a whole new society
Mhm.
and the struggles of meeting various expectations. And,
Mhm.
you go with a
Mhm.
degree in, say, for example,
Mhm.
I have a degree in law. I come to the United States. I cannot just go ahead and
Mhm.
practice law. I have to do a whole
Yeah.
360, and so I have to make a
Mhm.
decision between working and earning some money and sending
Yeah.
some money to my family, which, by the way, I had to do
Absolutely.
anyway because I could not afford to go
Yeah.
to school when I first came to this country.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
a scholarship also to study at the University of
Mhm.
Washington. And even then, I could
Mhm.
not afford to do it
Mhm.
because I have to give up different commitments that I owe to my family
Yeah.
to focus on myself
Yeah.
squarely. So I had to forgo it at the time and just work. And I did also menial
Mhm.
jobs
Mhm.
to make sure it settles.
Mhm.
But I think that part is very relatable. So if you talk to us very
Mhm.
briefly about why chapter 10 and how did you come
Mhm.
to bring out those stories of, immigrants, how
Yes.
they resettle in Western societies?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, chapter 10 is my favorite. And I think why I said that is the story of Daniel, more importantly, and not particularly the other characters. But like you mentioned, there are a lot of challenges for being an immigrant, especially in Scandinavia, in Sweden, uh, and more especially when you are educated. When I came to Sweden, and I wanted to go to university, some people were like, some Gambians were like, it's a waste of time. Some thought it was impossible because the requirements you have to get. Imagine you came to a country 2 years after, they say you have to be as fluent as us in this language for you to study in university. That was a challenge. Now, I know a lot of doctors. I know a lot of dentists who came from war-torn areas in the Middle East or in some parts of Africa, and they came to Scandinavia. They had to start from scratch. They are bus drivers. They work in McDonald's. They work in different jobs, and just because they don't want to go this route or start from scratch, right? Society has denied them the opportunity to practice what they've learned, what they've known all the time, because of certain requirements put forth that you have to fulfill. All right. So this is itself a challenge for a lot of people. But I think what is striking with chapter 10 is the story of Daniel. Daniel is an was he's an economist from the from Uganda, okay, who used to work in Uganda's central bank. Now he came to Sweden, and unfortunately couldn't find a job in his area, which is very common, like I said, in Scandinavia, in Sweden, because of the language barrier, right, and some bureaucratic measures that they put in place. Now he ended up being a bus driver, and then his family would constantly call him to say that your father is sick, we need money to take him to the hospital. And he would send money. He would send money all the time. They said this, he would send money. Okay. He would send money to the extent that he had to borrow money from people that he meets at the barber shop, the fictitious barber shop. And he actually even borrowed money from the bank. just to keep sending money home to help his father. And interestingly, all this time, the father was never sick. The family were just using him. The father was never sick. Now, one day, when the father was truly sick, they called Daniel and they wanted money, but Daniel doesn't have the
Mhm.
money because he cannot borrow from the bank because they now blacklisted him because he has borrowed so much that he cannot pay. He cannot borrow from his friends because owes everybody among his friends. He doesn't have anything, and now unfortunately his father passed. His father died. Now, we in the diaspora, a lot of us face things like this, where you realize that a lot of people are using you or they are not telling the truth, and you keep helping them, you keep helping them, you keep helping them until at the end you are left alone. So Daniel's story is sad because then, because of his father's death, he was in grief. He started drinking alcohol. Okay, he became an alcoholic in a sense, and then he lost his job, the bus driving job that he had, and then they called him back after a couple of months and said, oh yeah, we want you to take back your job. But then he had to do the test, alcohol test, to see whether his body can, support, whether he has alcohol in his body or not, just like in many countries. um, he did the exam, he did the test, and he failed
Mhm.
the test. Now, when he was called to be informed that unfortunately your alcohol test proved positive, we cannot give you back the job. Now, Daniel left that place, was headed to the barber
Mashallah.
shop, which was a sanctuary, a kind of a place where you meet and talk about griefs, talk about things. We have this in the West, in barber saloons, where you go and talk about the continent, you talk about issues back home and stuff like that about Africa. So on his way there, he was tragically hit by the same bus that he used to drive, and he died. So I'm saying this to say Daniel was killed both by his country, his people, but also by the system that he found himself in.
Mhm.
I think that's interesting.
That's profound.
And
Yes.
yeah, yeah,
It's a powerful story, and I'm telling you, if you start reading that chapter, it's hard. Before I read it, he did mention that to me, that when you start, it's hard
yeah.
to put it down. But it's true. That's how riveting the stories in the book really are. They're so moving, they're so relatable. But I think another important area that I found very relatable from the book is, I think, chapter 11 or 12. I'm not very sure, but one of these chapters you talked about your return, not you
Yes,
specifically, but the characters return to the Gambia, and
yeah.
how after being away for 3 decades, how everything seems so
Hmm.
different. And so even
Yes,
from your hotel room to driving around, the taxis, from the air and the smell of it, the feel of the cuisine of the taxi, all the way to the beaches, and then driving to go to your
yeah,
village. And so
yeah.
what's really stood out for me is the fact that he said this is there's a possibility that the village that you were born and raised in may not even
Hmm.
be there. But even if it is there, it may not be the same. But you
Yeah,
also raised
yeah.
the question of, even if the village is there, whether you, as you were when you're in the Gambia, is in existence. And so you
Yes,
raised two important issues that I think for most of us we struggle with. Like
yeah.
you find yourself in certain places, environment has a lot of impact and influence on you, and you change your perception change,
Yes, yes,
your awareness change,
yes.
a lot of things
Absolutely.
about you
Hmm.
change. And so
Yeah,
when you go
yeah,
back
yeah.
home, your parents meet you, your
Hmm.
friends meet you, even people that try to contact
Yeah,
you while you're abroad, they said, oh, Kari Falin Palestine, but they don't
hmm,
understand
hmm.
what
Yeah,
sort of things
absolutely,
that you wrestle
absolutely.
with to sort of
Yeah,
become this
yeah,
person
yeah,
that you are. But if you dial it
yeah,
on the
yeah,
little bit.
yeah. Yeah. Before I move into that, I have to tell you, Scandinavia is a very dangerous place. It is so dangerous. It can change you so quickly. So I remember when I actually 2021, when I had the consultancy with the United Nations, and I went to the Gambia. When I came in the morning, I woke up. I went to the boutique. I came. Um, I said. I say, hey, borom boutique, am nga mburu? Ako niya ko, assalamu alaikum.
Wow.
I go, okay. Because you know
I
what
know
I
what
mean?
you're saying.
Like in Scandinavia, you don't have to greet anybody. You just go to the shop, you get what you need, and you go away.
Yes.
So that humanity wasn't there. So when you live, when the character in the book lived in Scandinavia for 30 years, and they went back home, but not the same place that they
Yeah.
left. Okay, the village changed. Structurally, the village has changed. Okay, but psychologically, this person also has
Yeah.
changed, and that is the interesting part. So that tension for me, it reveals how migration stretches identity across time and space. So you return physically, but never epistemically unchanged. You are changed completely. You are not the same person. Okay, both in terms of like your patience with time, your move, how you walk. When I went to the Serekunda market with some of my cousins. I was literally like 50 feet ahead, and they are walking behind so slowly, and I am fast ahead. You know what I mean? I walk faster. I'm like, they're like, what happens to you, crazy? I'm like, you walking so slowly for my liking. So I had to like try to like, okay, you know what? You have to reset and meet these people halfway. Somebody was talking about this. Why are people not in a rush in Africa and compared to Scandinavia, where you don't have the sunlight? Because you have like daylight all the time. You are not in rush against time. Here we are time compressed in the West. Okay, that is one of the disasters of globalization. We are time compressed. You set your time. You wake up this time. You go to work this time. You have the same routine basically, and that is a challenge in itself. So when you return to the Gambia or whichever country you come from in Africa, you realize that there are a lot of like conflicting dialectical issues within you that you have to really struggle to reconcile with your former self. Your community, your people, because you really want to belong. But one of the challenges is when you go there, they will ask you, Ibrahim, Imam Muru follow. You haven't gone back home yet, which basically you are not. That's not your home. Imam Muru follow. That's not your home. So when you are in Seattle, somebody would say, "Oh, Ibrahima, how do you guys do this in your country, in Gambia?" So then you have this identity crisis. So that is interesting and is difficult for a lot of people to
It is.
navigate.
It is. And so for the book, do you have a copy of it in Timbuktu or Gambian libraries, or if not?
Yes, I did talk to Timbuktu. Actually, I'm supposed to send them some copies. And my hope is that the hopefully the Ministry of Education will find this interesting and try to incorporate it into the Gambian literature. Because what we have, I mean, in my time, we had a lot of like foreign books that we read. That's why I haven't remember reading a lot of Gambian authors going to school. You have Len Repeater, of course, but then you have Silas Mana, Buchi Emecheta, and all these authors from Nigeria, Ghana, and other places, but
Yeah.
very few Gambian literature. Achebe, very few Gambian literature. So I think it is time for Gambian literature to be there, to be in school, so a lot of our kids can relate to what is being said, what is being written. It's also inspiring. It inspires them a lot to write. Yeah, I remember. I think Ibu Jallo's book, "Meet Me in Conakry." Was it Ibu Jallo, "Meet Me in Conakry"? I used to hear about it, never read it. But things like that. If we had it growing up, we could be inspired as well. Definitely.
We're almost 2 hours into the conversation, but and then we can go on and on. But we cannot continue this conversation without having to put you talk to us about Gambian politics too, in terms of what is happening
Mhm.
currently.
Yeah.
Post
Yes.
2016 presidential elections, and you've talked and researched and published on this area. So you're pretty grounded
Yeah.
on not just political rhetoric and propaganda or just political talk to score political point. I think sometimes we do
Yes.
that a lot. We host politicians too, by the way. And for those of you who are familiar with this platform, we talk to
Hmm.
everybody. But I think the conversations differ. When you have scholars to talk to who's most of what they talk about are grounded in areas of research on facts and statistics and all these things. I think it offers a much more nuanced perspective than somebody who is mostly trying to get more people to vote for them. You know what I'm saying? but but yes, I think it will
Absolutely.
be important to have your thoughts on what's happening back home, bearing in mind we have elections a few months from now in December
Yes.
2026. What is your
Mhm.
assessment of post 2016 presidential elections that saw former President Jammeh ousted out of office and marked the beginning of the term of now President Barrow, who is getting into his 10th
Mhm.
year in office as president of the Gambia? Um,
Yeah.
what are some of the missed opportunities in your estimation of what you see?
Mhm.
What are the challenges? But
Mhm.
what are also the democratic gains that Gambia have so far experienced
Mhm.
since that change?
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, I think there are a lot of things we can talk about in terms of Gambian politics. But I think interestingly, Jammeh's time was an interesting time, and Jammeh's authoritarianism survived. I would say, um, not only through fear, but through meaning that Jammeh attached. Jammeh offers certainty, I would say, moral simplicity and symbolic strength in a context, I would say, of economic and social anxiety that we had at the time. Understanding that doesn't excuse it, explains it. So what I mean is that Jammeh did what he had to do, and in 2016, when the coalition was forced, I would say, actually by the diaspora into the opposition parties were emboldened by the diaspora to form a coalition, and Jammeh left 2017. We had an opportunity to forge a new beginning. And by that I mean to bring a new constitutional reforms. I was initially against the idea of having a new constitution. It would take a lot of resources. I was more concerned, I was more interested in us trying to amend the constitution that we had, the 1997 constitution. It could have been amended. A lot of clauses could have been included. A lot of things could have been taken out, etc., etc. Because the new constitution that was espoused was a challenge, because the new constitution itself came at a time um, when the country was fragmented, right? And we faced that challenge. And now fast forward, we are in 2026, and we have elections in December. We have recently seen the polls, what the polls said about the current situation in the country, and I found that very interesting. At the same time, the dichotomy is that what is it that people are not happy about in terms of like the system, given the a lot of the operators in the government are very much I would say very much happy with the infrastructural development going on. uh, then if that is so, why is it that the likelihood of people voting for the current government, according to the poll, is not what people were expecting? It is interesting to decipher that, but I found it very interesting. But again, polls, what election polls? Gambia, we know the use of polls, right? This is I thank my professor there, Said Mati, and the colleagues for bringing up this poll. And I think we need a lot of things like that in order to measure the mood of the country. Even though polls just measure moods, they don't measure destiny. It is important to take that into account. But they can strengthen our democracy in many ways if they are read critically. And that is the part that we have to take into account. But they can also produce complacency or despair in a sense. But political literacy is key. when you're doing polls, but more importantly when you're analyzing them, because they can be interpreted in different ways. So yes.
So I'm going to ask you about political parties in the Gambia, not just
Mhm.
opposition parties, but also the incumbent, the National People's Party, and what they consider as their
Mhm.
grand coalition. And they, with the polls that we're finding so far from Sepras, by the way, Sepras, I think, let me add to what you already said, are doing a phenomenal job. Sepras, Afrobarometer, and also
Yeah,
Gambia Participate, all of these institutions are adding.
yeah,
Yes,
Mariam, yeah,
Mariam,
absolutely.
I've had it on this platform too.
Mhm.
They're adding significant value to our politics,
Yeah,
and I think,
absolutely.
for those of you who are in politics, you can either do two things. You can either take the findings of these outcomes seriously or don't. But I do think that
Absolutely.
what is consequential is to completely ignore the really wonderful Gambians who are behind some of these initiatives, and some of whom
Mhm.
you and I know have very little connections or interest
Yeah,
in politicized.
absolutely.
So I think what I'm trying to say is that I think their work is genuine. I think their work is sincere. I think their work is credible, and they're adding a lot of
Mhm.
value to what is happening back home. So people should really support them, and I hope they continue to
Absolutely.
also, be very strong in what they do and do not compromise their values and principles, because that is extremely important. But if you would,
Yeah.
I would ask you a few things about political parties in the Gambia. NPP seems to be favorable, not in terms of how popular they are, but in terms of their, pole position of winning the incoming elections compared to the alternatives. People said
Mhm.
even though Barrow is not doing very well, he's likely to win when you place him against
Mhm.
any of these opposition candidates that are currently in the Gambia.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is the case?
Mhm. I think the for me, I think elections in the Gambia are won in the rural areas. That's my understanding. When you look at the statistics, elections are not won in the combos, mostly in Banjul and in Birkama or in Serekunda. Why? Because we have the diversification of parties in these areas is so huge. For example, if you go to Gunjur today, most people in Gunjur would probably vote for Lamin J. Dabo because he is probably from Gunjur, right? So, which basically means if Dr. Dabo didn't exist, right? Most voters would probably vote for another
Yeah.
party. But because we have a lot of these parties in the country right now, in the combos, in the combos, so you have like a lot of people voting for them. But if you move from Foni and you move on to Central River region, to URR and all these places, most parties haven't reached those bases yet, and that is where the challenge lies. This is why I feel like if this poll was conducted in another place, not in Jara or wherever it is conducted right now, in another city, in Basse, you would probably get different results. That is really important to understand. Now, polls are like tools, and when you have new tools, you have to learn about them. That is important. So the type of questions raised also determines the answer you get. If you come to me and ask me who is likely going to win 2026, I am probably going to tell you is Barrow. Okay. But that is different from you asking me, are you going to vote for Barrow or not? You
Yeah.
understand? So these are things that we have to take into account when we talk about the polls. But again, the fragmentation of the opposition parties in the combos means that a lot of the parties will get a chunk of here and there. But when you move on to the rural area, probably only two parties will count, and that is the UDP and the NPP. And the UDP, because of its longevity, but also UDP is today, I think, the party in the country, in a sense. NPP because it is the incumbent. So many years ago, no one thought about the NPP. It was APRC and UDP. So you can see how voters' perspective are going to change if the polls were conducted in a different location. If polls were conducted in Bansan, you're probably going to get different result. If the polls were conducted in Nyamina, where you have Ahmad Bas, people, it's probably going to be going to be different as well. So wherever they are conducted, the timing, the location, the type of question asked are really important. They are relevant in terms of trying to gauge. But it's important we put it into context. The NPP has done a lot of infrastructural development. Some might feel like that is contested again. But again, for a village that has never seen electricity, for a village that has never seen water, for a village where the kids would have to walk 5 kilometers to go to school, and you bring those things to them, they're definitely going to vote for you. Because in our community, in our politics, is Said Mati mentioned this one time, and somebody was contesting it. What we have is called developmental politics. Developmental politics is what you bring on the table, what you bring to me. What did you build for me? What did you do for me? It's not about the policies that you put in place. Now, having done what you've done, now how do you help me bring food to the table? How do you help me feed my family? Because I'm not going to feed them with these roads that you built, with this thing that you built. Of course, they are good, they are a starting point. Now, you have to move on to stabilize the economy. That is really important because for the market woman, they are not interested in your physical planning, how your GDP, if that does not translate into their reality. That is important. I think that is the challenge that the government has right now. But as an analyst, I'm not an expert on Gambian politics. Of course, I do my part, but I think the biggest challenge that the government of the Gambia faces is the inability to, of course, fight corruption, but the inability to control the narrative about the development that it has been pursuing. That is a challenge. If you control the narrative, you find.
Finally, Ahmad, it's been again over 2 hours, and we started this conversation about 6 a.m. in DC and 3 a.m. in Seattle, and you can see we're still at it, and we can keep going and going. But I think the idea is to have Ahmad here as a frequent guest, as a subject matter expert on a variety of subjects. So you're going to be seeing him. I'm putting him on the spot right now. I didn't talk to him about this, but I'm putting him on the spot to say that he's going to be here a lot more
You have
often.
my address. Just send me the check. I'll be fine.
Well, I can't afford you, man. I'm from Brikama.
No problem. You're my brother, Ibrahim.
But finally, man,
Yes.
and I ask all of my guests this question too. What keeps you up at night? Why are you so committed to the rigors of intellectual work as a political scientist? And really, what's your call for hope, and what is your purpose as well as you continue? Because it seems like you're so older than me, but you're not. So you're just born in 1987, and
Yeah.
so you still have a very long way to go in
Yeah.
terms of this journey that you are on.
Hmm.
But really, talk to us about things that you're wrestling with, both passionately, but also in terms of this intellectual journey that you are on.
Hmm. Mm. Interesting. I think I am very blessed, I would say. I have a wonderful family. My wife is also a graduate scholar at Howard University. I can see her comment on the Facebook. Dera Mudabo. She exposes herself now. So yes, she is here. My daughter is 16 months old now. She's also sometimes I take her to class when I'm teaching and all of that. But I'm saying this to say that I am very blessed, thankful. But again, my commitment to intellectualism. I have always been interested in reading, in finding out, more importantly, in pedagogy, in teaching. Um, this is something that I have been very interested in. Growing up, going to Quranic school, it opens up your that was my first encounter with pedagogy. When the stars would teach us, but also when we who had advanced would also teach the younger ones and stuff like that. So you can see how knowledge is produced. So I am very much. I am a reader. I read. I like reading fiction, non-fictions. Listen to podcasts and all of that. But in terms of struggling, I don't know. Basically,
Like
but of
academic questions, or philosophical
Yes, I
questions.
wish I wish I
rather
wish
than-
I am really good at mathematics. I would do more statistics and stuff like that, which is very interesting. Interpreting statistics is really interesting. That is something I am struggling. I don't need it right now. I don't think I would need it. I don't want to be in a position where I would have to definitely need it. If I am, I probably would hire somebody to do that part for me. But I found it very, very interesting. But for me, moving away from Scandinavia, from PWI, PWI, majority white institution where you have, and coming to a HBCU, it's been one of the biggest blessings. It's a place where I am vulnerable without being vulnerable, where I'm growing intellectually, but also having great people around me. It's very inspiring. So yes, I am grateful for that. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, it has. But if we can cap it up with the one final question, I promise it will be the last one, is also the struggle of, again, identity between African Americans and Africans.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a
Interesting.
reality in
Interesting.
there
Hmm.
within most of us where, and this is
Interesting.
perhaps controversial. A lot of African Americans,
Interesting.
find
Hmm.
it tough to relate with us, and understandably so.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think I read, I think Cornell talked about this too in one of his books, to say that
Hmm.
black people must not confuse their history with that of the Israelites. That for us, Pharaoh is in both sides of the Red
Absolutely.
Sea. Just to make
Absolutely.
the point that
Hmm.
we are all black, uh,
Hmm.
but also our experiences and live experiences differ, right? And
Absolutely.
so, is that any
Absolutely.
point in your journey at Howard where still the subject of identity or struggling to fit in, either in terms of cultures, in
Absolutely.
terms of relatability,
Absolutely.
or is there anything at all that stands out
Mhm.
for you in that
I
respect?
think you're speaking like my professor right now, Professor Dr. Johnson. She's doing work on this diaspora, and I think one of the challenges, even in the U.S., foreign policy in terms of using the diaspora is the idea of clustering the diaspora together and defining it as one. Okay, we have different live experiences, right? And in my research in conferences, I tend to refer to I tend to categorize. I would say the old diaspora and the contemporary diaspora. Now,
Mhm.
the old diaspora is a product of slavery. It's a product of forced migration during that time. The contemporary diaspora, it's the diaspora that came. It's a post-war diaspora, post-colonial diaspora, right? It's a product of globalization. They came either to improve themselves, education, their political exile, etc., etc. It's different from the enslaved product of enslaved African Americans. So you realize that because our experiences are not the same, most of the time we should avoid being clustered together in terms of definition. But that does not mean our realities are far, far from one another. It's not much of a difference. And this is why I feel like most of the time we tend to think that there is a lot of cleavages between us and the African American, which I don't see, which I don't also think we should entertain. especially when somebody comes to you and tell you that, oh, these people, they are lazy, they don't do that, they don't do that. Remember that this same person is probably going to that person and telling that person, Ibrahim Anata Jampurkela Doko Ta. Ibrahim came here to get your job. This new immigrant are coming here to get your jobs. So that creates a kind of a clash between us and the African Americans. And the clash that I usually say that the dichotomy that we have between the African American and the American African is actually benefiting somebody, and that is what we shouldn't accept. We shouldn't accept somebody come to me and tell me these people are this, these people are that, because then they're gonna go to that person and tell them I am here to take their job. And the lack of unity among African American, or between the African American on the one hand and us, the immigrant who came, that lack of unity is benefiting somebody, and that is something that we shouldn't entertain. I am not at the moment struggling with any identity. I think Howard is a place that it's I don't know how to explain it. You don't. It's very African in a sense. It's an African intellectual hub. So every African American you meet there, they are so much like grounded in terms of Africa history, knowledge. So much like Pan Africanist in a sense, and Gavi's Marcus Garvey, and they are more forward thinking. So I think that is really helpful, I would say.
Well, I think that would be, I think, a wonderful opportunity for us to carve it up here. And just to once again say to you, this is a lecture moment for me. It's been a teaching moment for me, and I really enjoyed no, for real. I'm serious, man.
Thank
For
you,
me,
brother.
always blown away by ideas, especially when it comes from our brothers or sisters from
Yes.
Gambia. I
Hmm.
think there's a level of relatability, but also appreciation that comes with it. So it means a
Absolutely.
lot that you agreed to come on this show to have a
Thank
conversation
you.
with. But also, thanks so much for the
Yeah.
book that you sent for me.
Oh, no problem.
Uh, yes, the copy of the book you sent for me, and just also to add that I think you can't run away from me anymore. I'm gonna be bothering you a lot more about the
Yes,
show, but also about other questions.
absolutely. I'm here. Once again, like I said, I am very proud of you. But also, more importantly, I would say keep it up. When you start things like this, you are actually contributing a lot to knowledge production. You're actually contributing a lot to nation building. This is what we need. We need conversations about this. We need conversations around issues that are affecting us in the diaspora, that are also affecting us back home, and bringing in expertise or people with different opinions. It's really good. It helps diversify our schools of thought. It helps us also learn from one another, but more importantly, it helps us understand and inspire one another. And I think that is what is good about this. So it's not easy to wake up this time. It's not easy to run a podcast and go to school and have a job and have a family at the same time. It's a lot of navigation to do, right? But it's not impossible. Like I said, you are young. This is an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to listen, and also to share. And definitely, I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you all very much
Yes.
to our followers too who are on the comment section. The mastermind, Pamodo and I actually went to school together. We're all in Nusrat High School, same class
Oh,
at some point as well. And
okay.
Mata, thank you all very much. And
Yes.
also your wife who is on the comment section. We
Oh,
see
yes.
all of you. Thank you, Momos Trucking. Thank you so
Yes.
much. We
Yes.
really appreciate all of it. Please consider sharing it. That's one way you can support us. Share the conversation on your platforms. And also, if you're watching us, actually, a lot more people were watching on YouTube are still watching on YouTube, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So thank you all for
Yes.
being here. And while you're watching it, I said to also thank you. Consider subscribing to our YouTube and
Yes.
support, what we're doing. We're going to be bringing more and more Gambian subject matter experts, and just Gambians who have a voice, even those without a voice. We talk to everybody here. So once again, I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you all for your support and love and encouragement. We appreciate it. I'll let you go, Amat, once
Thank
again.
you, Ibrahima. Thank you, Ibrahima. You should go catch some sleep, hopefully.
Yes, yes.
All right. Okay.
Take
Take
it